The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty saloon, and Olivia Roswell pressed her gloved hand against the window, her heart hammering against her ribs as she stared at the unfamiliar town of Knights Ferry, California, wondering if the man waiting for her would notice she was not the woman he had corresponded with for the past 6 months. The driver yanked open the door, and the September heat of 1878 hit her like a physical force. Olivia gathered her skirts and stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her trunk landing with a heavy thud beside her. Knights Ferry was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered buildings clustered along the Stanislaus River, surrounded by rolling hills that had turned golden under the relentless summer sun. "You the bride?" a gravelly voice asked. Olivia turned to find a portly man with a silver star pinned to his vest. His eyes were kind but curious, and she felt the weight of her deception settle more heavily on her shoulders. "I am," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I am supposed to meet Colton Lawrence." The sheriff nodded, scratching his gray beard. "Colton's out at his ranch, the Double L, about 5 miles northwest of town. He does not come into town much these days, not since his mother passed last spring. I can send word if you would like to wait at the hotel." Olivia's chest tightened. The real bride, her cousin Margaret, was supposed to be standing here. Margaret, who had exchanged letters with Colton Lawrence for months, who had promised to marry him and help him run his cattle ranch. But Margaret had fallen in love with a banker's son in St. Louis 2 weeks before the journey west, and in a moment of desperation and foolishness, Olivia had offered to take her place. "I would prefer to go to him now, if possible," Olivia said. "I have traveled a long way." The sheriff studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I will have someone take you out there. Tommy," he called to a young man lounging outside the general store, "hitch up a wagon and take this lady out to the Double L Ranch." As they rattled out of town, Olivia tried to prepare herself for the moment Colton Lawrence would realize she was not Margaret. Her cousin had sent him a photograph, but it had been taken from a distance, and Margaret had assured her they looked similar enough that it would not matter. Both had dark hair and light eyes, both were of average height and build. But Olivia knew the differences were there for anyone who looked closely. The ranch appeared suddenly as they crested a hill, a sprawling property with a 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Olivia could see the glint of water from what must be a creek running through the property. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that made her breath catch. A man emerged from the barn as the wagon approached. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His dark hair curled slightly at the edges beneath his worn hat, and even from a distance, Olivia could see the sharp angles of his face. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his surroundings. As Tommy brought the wagon to a stop, the man approached, wiping his hands on his denim trousers. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, and they fixed on Olivia with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Miss Margaret?" he asked, his voice deep and slightly rough. This was the moment. Olivia opened her mouth to tell him the truth, but the words stuck in her throat. She saw something in his expression, a mixture of hope and wariness, and she could not bring herself to disappoint him immediately. "I am Olivia," she said instead. "Olivia Roswell." Colton's brow furrowed slightly. "I thought your name was Margaret." "It is," she said quickly, her face flushing. "Margaret is my middle name, but my family has always called me Olivia. I should have mentioned it in my letters." She hated lying to him, but she had come too far to turn back now. There was nothing waiting for her in St. Louis, except a position as a governess in a household where the master had wandering hands. This was her chance at a different life, even if it began with deception. Colton studied her for a long moment, and Olivia felt certain he could see right through her. But then he nodded slowly. "I am pleased to meet you, Olivia. Welcome to the Double L." He paid Tommy and lifted her trunk from the wagon as though it weighed nothing. Olivia followed him toward the house, acutely aware of the breadth of his shoulders and the way his shirt stretched across his back. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps only 26 or 27, with a face that would have been handsome if not for the deep lines of worry etched around his eyes and mouth. The house was larger inside than it had appeared from the outside, with high ceilings and large windows that let in the afternoon light. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was surprisingly clean for a bachelor's home. "I have prepared the spare room for you," Colton said, setting her trunk down in the hallway. "We can be married in town tomorrow if that suits you. The parson comes through Knight's Ferry every Saturday." Olivia's stomach dropped. "Tomorrow." "Unless you would prefer to wait," Colton said, his expression guarded. "But you wrote that you were eager to begin our life together. Has something changed?" She could hear the vulnerability beneath his careful words and guilt twisted in her chest. "No," she said softly. "Tomorrow is fine. I am just tired from the journey." Colton's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Of course. I will show you to your room. We can talk more over supper." He led her upstairs to a small but comfortable room with a bed covered in a worn quilt and a window that looked out over the ranch. When he left her alone, Olivia sank onto the bed and pressed her hands to her face. What had she done? This man was planning to marry her tomorrow, and he did not even know who she really was. But what choice did she have? If she told him the truth now, he would send her back to town, and she had nowhere to go. At least here, she could make herself useful. She could learn to be a rancher's wife, to help him build his life. Maybe, in time, she could find a way to tell him the truth, or maybe it would not matter anymore. That evening, Colton prepared a simple meal of stew and bread. They sat across from each other at the large wooden table, and Olivia felt the weight of his gaze as she ate. "You look different than your photograph," he said finally. Olivia's heart stuttered. "Do I? Smaller, somehow." "More delicate." He paused. "Prettier." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Thank you. Tell me about your journey," he said. "Your letters mention you were leaving from St. Louis." This, at least, she could answer honestly. It was long but not too difficult. The train to California was crowded but comfortable enough. The stage coach from Stockton was less pleasant. Colton nodded. "I have not been back east in years. Not since I came here with my parents when I was 16. My father had dreams of raising the finest cattle in California." "Did he succeed?" Olivia asked. A shadow passed over Colton's face. "He died before he could see it come to fruition. A bad fall from his horse 6 years ago. My mother lasted longer, but she was never the same after he was gone. She passed last April." "I am so sorry," Olivia said, and she meant it. She knew something about loss herself. Her own parents had died of fever when she was 15, leaving her to be raised by an aunt who viewed her as an obligation rather than family. "It is part of life out here," Colton said, but his voice was tight. "The land takes as much as it gives. But I have built something good here. The ranch is profitable, the cattle are healthy. All I needed was someone to share it with." The loneliness in his words made Olivia's chest ache. She understood that feeling all too well. "Your letters spoke of your love for the outdoors," Colton continued. "Of your desire for a life away from city crowds. I hope the reality lives up to your expectations." Olivia thought of Margaret's letters, filled with romantic notions about ranch life that her cousin had never intended to follow through on. "I am sure it will," she said carefully. "Though I confess I have much to learn about ranching." "I can teach you," Colton said, and for the first time she saw the hint of a smile soften his features. If you are willing to learn. I am, Olivia said, and she realized she meant it. Whatever brought her here, she wanted to make this work. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Olivia stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine her life as Colton Lawrence's wife. He seemed like a good man, hardworking and honest, the kind of man who deserved better than to be deceived. But she pushed the guilt away and focused instead on the hope flickering in her chest. Maybe this could be a new beginning. Maybe she could become the woman he needed. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Colton was already up when Olivia came downstairs, dressed in his best suit. It was slightly worn but clean, and he had shaved, revealing the strong line of his jaw. "Are you ready?" he asked. Olivia wore the nicest dress she owned, a deep blue silk that had belonged to her mother. She nodded, trying to calm the frantic beating of her heart. The ride into town was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Knight's Ferry was busier on Saturday morning, with wagons and horses crowding the main street. Curious eyes followed them as Colton helped Olivia down from the wagon, and she felt the weight of the town's scrutiny. The church was small and simple, with rough-hewn pews and a wooden cross above the altar. The parson was a thin man with kind eyes who asked them a few perfunctory questions before beginning the ceremony. The sheriff and his wife served as witnesses, standing solemnly as Colton and Olivia exchanged vows. When the parson asked if anyone objected to the union, Olivia held her breath, half expecting Margaret herself to burst through the door. But no one spoke, and the ceremony continued. "Do you, Colton Michael Lawrence, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Colton said, his voice steady and sure. "And do you, Olivia Margaret Roswell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The use of Margaret's name felt like a knife between her ribs, but Olivia forced herself to speak. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Colton turned to her, and for a moment their eyes met. Olivia saw uncertainty there, and something else she could not quite name. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips gently to hers. It was chaste and brief, but it sent a shiver through her body. They were married. The sheriff's wife insisted on hosting a small celebration at her home, and Olivia found herself surrounded by curious townspeople wanting to meet Colton's new bride. She answered their questions as best she could, careful to keep her story straight, while Colton stood beside her with his hand resting lightly on her back. "You are a lucky woman," one older lady told her. "Colton is a fine man. He took excellent care of his mother in her final days, never left her side. That is the mark of true character." Olivia glanced at her new husband and felt another pang of guilt. He was a good man, and he deserved to know the truth. But every moment that passed made it harder to confess. When they finally returned to the ranch, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Colton brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and turned to her. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that I do not expect anything from you tonight, or any night until you are ready. I know this is all very sudden, and I want you to feel comfortable here." Relief and disappointment warred in Olivia's chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "That is very kind." They went inside, and the house felt different now, heavier somehow with the weight of their new relationship. Colton showed Olivia where everything was in the kitchen, how to work the stove, where he kept the supplies. She listened carefully, determined to be useful. That night, they ate supper together again, falling into an easier conversation than the night before. Colton told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd and improve the grazing land. Olivia found herself genuinely interested, asking questions and offering observations that seemed to please him. "You have a quick mind," he said, looking at her with something like approval. That will serve you well out here." As the days passed, Olivia began to settle into her new life. She woke early each morning to prepare breakfast before Colton headed out to work. She cleaned the house, tended the small vegetable garden behind the barn, and tried to learn everything she could about running a ranch household. It was harder work than she had expected, but she found satisfaction in it. Colton was patient with her, teaching her how to milk the cow, how to collect eggs from the henhouse, how to preserve food for the winter months ahead. He rarely spoke about anything personal, keeping their conversations focused on practical matters, but Olivia began to notice small things about him. The way he always checked the horizon before going inside, as if searching for something. The gentle way he handled the animals. The sadness that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the wedding, Olivia was hanging laundry when she heard the thunder of hooves. She looked up to see Colton riding hard toward the house, followed by another man. Her heart leaped into her throat as she recognized the urgency in their movements. Colton dismounted quickly. "We have cattle missing," he said, his face grim. "At least a dozen head, maybe more, rustlers most likely." The other man, who Colton introduced as his neighbor Jack Miller, nodded in agreement. "They hit my ranch last week. Looks like they are working their way through the valley." "What will you do?" Olivia asked. "Track them," Colton said. "Jack and I, along with a few other ranchers. We will leave tomorrow at first light." Fear clutched at Olivia's chest. "Is it dangerous?" Colton's expression softened slightly. "I will be careful," he said. "But I cannot let them take what I have worked so hard to build." That evening, Colton prepared for the journey. He cleaned his rifle and packed supplies while Olivia prepared food for him to take. Neither spoke much, but the air between them felt charged with unspoken worry. As darkness fell, Colton came to find her in the kitchen. "Olivia," he said, and the use of her name sent a small thrill through her. "If something happens to me, there is money hidden in a box under the floorboards in my room. It should be enough to get you back east or to start over somewhere else." "Do not talk like that," Olivia said, her voice sharper than she intended. "You will be fine." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I hope so, but a man should be prepared for any outcome." On impulse, Olivia crossed the room and took his hand. It was rough and calloused from years of hard work, but it was warm and solid in hers. "Come back safely," she said. "Please." Colton looked down at their joined hands, and something shifted in his expression. "I will do my best," he said quietly. That night, Olivia barely slept. She lay in her bed, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her, and thought about the man sleeping down the hall. Her husband. Somewhere along the way, over these past 2 weeks, he had stopped being a stranger. She found herself looking forward to their meals together, to the sound of his voice, to the rare smiles he gave her. The guilt of her deception had not lessened, but it had been joined by something else. Something that felt dangerously like affection. Colton left before dawn, and the house felt empty without him. Olivia threw herself into work, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed, working in the garden until her back ached. But nothing could distract her from the fear that gnawed at her stomach. 3 days passed with no word. Olivia maintained the ranch as best she could, feeding the animals and checking the fences as Colton had taught her. At night, she sat on the porch and watched the road, hoping to see riders approaching. On the 4th evening, as the sun was setting, she finally saw a group of horsemen in the distance. Olivia ran toward them, her skirts held high, her heart pounding. As they drew closer, she saw Colton at the front, looking tired but unharmed. Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. Colton dismounted and caught her elbow, steadying her. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I was so worried," she said, not caring how it sounded. "I did not know if you would come back." Something warm flickered in Colton's eyes. "I told you I would do my best." "Did you find them?" Olivia asked. "We did," Jack Miller said from his horse. "Caught them trying to cross the border with cattle from 3 different ranches. The sheriff has them in custody now." "And the cattle?" Olivia asked. "Safe," Colton said. "We will round them up tomorrow and bring them back." The other men rode off, leaving Colton and Olivia alone in the gathering darkness. He looked exhausted, with several days' worth of stubble on his jaw and dirt smudged across his face. "Come inside," Olivia said. "I will heat water for you to wash, and there is stew warming on the stove." As Colton cleaned up and ate, Olivia found herself unable to stop looking at him. The fear of the past few days had crystallized something inside her, made her see the truth she had been avoiding. She cared about this man, more than cared. She was falling in love with him. The realization terrified her. How could she love someone she had deceived so thoroughly? How could she build a life on such a rotten foundation? "Olivia," Colton's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I am fine," she said quickly. "Just tired." But Colton was watching her with those perceptive amber eyes, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see more than she wanted him to. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. With the rustlers caught, the valley returned to normal, and Colton focused on preparing for winter. Olivia worked alongside him as much as she could, learning to salt meat and can vegetables, to chop wood and mend fences. Her hands became rough and calloused, her skin tanned from the sun, but she felt stronger than she ever had in St. Louis. She also grew closer to Colton. They developed routines and rhythms, small intimacies that came from sharing a life. He began to linger over breakfast, telling her stories about growing up on the ranch. She learned that his favorite color was the blue of the sky just before sunset, that he had a weakness for apple pie, that he sometimes woke from nightmares about losing the ranch like his father had feared. In turn, Olivia shared pieces of her own life, carefully editing out any details that might contradict Margaret's letters. She told him about growing up in St. Louis, about her love of reading, about the loneliness of losing her parents. These moments of honesty made the lies feel even heavier, but she could not seem to stop herself from opening up to him. One crisp October morning, Colton asked if she would like to ride out with him to check on the cattle. Olivia had learned to ride in the weeks since her arrival, though she was still not entirely comfortable on horseback. But the chance to spend more time with Colton was too tempting to resist. They rode out across the Golden Hills, the air cool and clean. Colton pointed out landmarks, teaching her to read the land the way he did. They found the cattle grazing peacefully near the creek, and Colton counted them carefully, making notes in a small book he carried. "This land has been good to my family," he said as they sat on their horses, looking out over the ranch. "My father used to say it was sacred, that we were just caretakers for a little while. I think he was right." "It is beautiful," Olivia said, and she meant it. The wild, open spaces had gotten into her blood, making her feel more alive than she ever had in the city. Colton turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "I am glad you came," he said. "I know things have not been easy, and I am not always the best company. But having you here has made this feel like a home again instead of just a place I work." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "Colton, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" he asked, concern creasing his brow. This was her chance. She could tell him the truth, confess everything, and hope he would understand. But as she looked at him, at this good man who had given her a home and a purpose, the words died in her throat. She could not bear to see disappointment in his eyes, could not risk losing what they had built. "Thank you," she said instead, "for bringing me here, for giving me this chance." It was not what she had meant to say, but Colton smiled and it transformed his face. "You have made it worth it," he said. They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, but Olivia's mind was churning. She could not keep lying to him. Eventually, the truth would come out, and the longer she waited, the worse the betrayal would feel. But she also could not bear to lose him, not now that she had finally found someone who made her feel like she belonged. That evening, as they were clearing the supper dishes, a knock came at the door. Colton answered it to find a young man holding a telegram. "For Mrs. Lawrence," the man said. Olivia's blood rang cold as she took the telegram with shaking hands. No one knew she was here except Margaret. She opened it with Colton watching, her eyes scanning the words with growing dread. "Olivia, I have made a terrible mistake. I am coming to California to marry Colton as planned. Please do not interfere. You must leave before I arrive. Margaret." The paper slipped from Olivia's fingers and fluttered to the floor. Colton picked it up, his expression puzzled as he read it. "I do not understand," he said slowly. "Who is Margaret?" There was no escape now. Olivia sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. "I am," she whispered. "Or rather, I am not." Colton stared at her. "What are you talking about?" And so, with tears streaming down her face, Olivia told him everything. About Margaret's engagement to the banker's son, about taking her cousin's place, about the lies she had told from the moment she arrived. She watched his face change as she spoke, saw the hurt and betrayal replace the warmth that had been there moments before. When she finished, silence filled the kitchen like a physical presence. Colton stood frozen, the telegram still in his hand, his knuckles white where he gripped it. "So you have been lying to me this entire time," he said finally, his voice flat and cold. "Every conversation, every moment we shared, it was all built on deception." "Not all of it," Olivia said desperately. "The person I have been with you, that is real. The only thing I lied about was my name and how I came to be here. Everything else, my feelings, my desire to make this work, that has all been true." "How can I believe anything you say?" Colton asked, and the pain in his voice cut her deeper than anger would have. "I trusted you. I let you into my home, my life. I was starting to care about you." He shook his head. "God, what a fool I have been." "You are not a fool," Olivia said, standing and reaching for him. He stepped back, avoiding her touch, and it felt like a physical blow. "Please, Colton, let me make this right." "How?" he demanded. "Your cousin is coming here expecting to marry me. What am I supposed to tell her? That you have already taken her place, that we are married?" "We are married," Olivia said. "That is real, regardless of how it came about." "Is it?" Colton asked bitterly. "You married me under false pretenses. I do not even know if it is legal. And even if it is, how could I stay married to someone I cannot trust?" Olivia felt her world crumbling around her. "What are you going to do?" Colton ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with anguish. "I do not know. I need time to think. I cannot be in the same room with you right now." He grabbed his hat and coat and walked out, leaving Olivia alone in the kitchen. She heard the barn door slam and knew he was taking shelter there, putting as much distance between them as he could. She spent the night curled in her bed, crying until she had no tears left. This was what she deserved, she told herself. She had lied and deceived a good man, and now she was paying the price. But knowing she deserved it did not make the pain any less acute. The next morning, Colton came into the house long enough to eat a silent breakfast, then left again without speaking to her. Olivia moved through the day like a ghost, doing her chores mechanically while her mind raced. Margaret could arrive any day now, and what would happen then? Would Colton try to annul their marriage? Would he send Olivia away and marry Margaret instead? The thought of leaving the ranch, of never seeing Colton again, was unbearable. Somewhere over the past 2 months, this place had become her home, and Colton had become the person she cared about most in the world. She loved him. The realization had come too late to do any good, but it was there, solid and undeniable in her chest. 3 days passed in tense silence. Colton slept in the barn and avoided her as much as possible. The few times they crossed paths, he would not meet her eyes. Olivia felt like she was dying slowly, the weight of her guilt and grief crushing her a little more each day. On the 4th day, another stagecoach arrived in Knight's Ferry. Olivia was in the garden when she heard the wagon approaching and looked up to see Margaret sitting primly in the seat, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed beneath a fashionable hat. Behind her sat a young man who could only be the banker's son. Olivia's heart dropped to her feet. She set down her basket and walked slowly toward the wagon, wiping her dirty hands on her apron. Margaret's eyes widened when she saw her, and not with happiness. "What are you still doing here?" Margaret hissed as she climbed down. "I sent you a telegram days ago telling you to leave." "I am married to him," Olivia said quietly. "I am not leaving." Margaret's face turned red. "How dare you? Those were my letters, my promises. You had no right to steal my life." "You did not want this life," Olivia reminded her. "You were in love with someone else. You asked me to come here in your place." "I asked you to explain to Mr. Lawrence that I could not come," Margaret said shrilly. "Not to marry him yourself." The commotion had drawn Colton from the barn. He stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. The young man jumped down from the wagon. "I am Daniel Bennett," he said, extending his hand to Colton. "Margaret's fiancé. I apologize for this confusion. Margaret has had a change of heart about our engagement, and she wishes to honor her commitment to you instead." Colton did not take his hand. "Is that so?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And what about you, Miss Margaret? Is this what you want?" Margaret looked between Colton and Daniel, uncertainty flickering across her face. Up close, the resemblance between her and Olivia was clear, but so were the differences. Margaret was softer, prettier in a conventional way, with none of the sun-bronzed strength that Olivia had developed over the past 2 months. "I made a promise," Margaret said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I wrote those letters. You were expecting me." "I was expecting the woman in those letters," Colton said. "But I have learned that letters can be deceiving. Tell me the truth, Miss Margaret. Do you want to be a rancher's wife? Can you milk a cow, salt meat, spend days without seeing another person? Can you love this land the way it deserves to be loved?" Margaret's silence was answer enough. She glanced at Daniel, and Olivia saw the truth written plainly on her face. She did not want to be here. She wanted to go back to St. Louis with the man she loved. "I thought not," Colton said. He turned to Daniel. "Take her home. Marry her if that is what you both want, but do not come back here." "What about your marriage to my cousin?" Margaret demanded. "Surely it is not legal given the circumstances." "That is between me and Olivia," Colton said. "It has nothing to do with you anymore." Margaret looked as though she wanted to argue, but Daniel took her arm. "Come on," he said gently. "Let us go home." As the wagon pulled away, Olivia and Colton stood in the yard, the dust settling around them. Olivia hardly dared to breathe, waiting for him to speak. Finally, Colton turned to her. "Come inside," he said. "We need to talk." They sat at the kitchen table, the same place where they had shared so many meals. Colton looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and tension in every line of his body. "I have spent the last few days thinking," he said, "about what you did, about why you did it, about what it means for us going forward." Olivia waited, her hands clenched in her lap. "What you did was wrong," Colton continued. "You lied to me, deceived me, married me under false pretenses. That is not something I can simply overlook." "I know," Olivia whispered. "I am so sorry, Colton. If I could go back and do it differently, I would." "Would you?" he asked. "Because I have been trying to understand what I would have done in your place. If I had been desperate, alone, with no prospects and no future. If someone had offered me a way out, even if it meant deceiving a stranger. I do not know if I would have been any more honest than you were." Hope flickered in Olivia's chest, but she did not dare let it grow. "The woman I have come to know over these past 2 months," Colton said slowly. "She is not a liar or a deceiver. She is hardworking and kind and genuinely interested in this life. She has made my house a home. She has made me remember what it feels like to not be alone." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "That woman is me," she said. "The real me. Not the person pretending to be Margaret, but Olivia. The person I was always meant to be." Colton reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was warm and solid, and Olivia felt like she could finally breathe again. "I do not know if I can trust you completely, not yet," he said honestly. "But I want to try. I want to build something real with you, Olivia, not based on letters or lies, but on who we actually are." "I want that too," Olivia said, squeezing his hand. "More than anything." "Then we start over," Colton said. "Right now, right here. No more secrets, no more deception, just the truth, even when it is hard." "Just the truth," Olivia agreed. Colton stood and pulled her to her feet, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, not chaste and brief like their wedding kiss, but deep and searching. Olivia melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, feeling like she had finally come home. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Colton rested his forehead against hers. "I was so angry with you," he murmured. "But also with myself, because even knowing what you had done, I could not stop caring about you. I tried, but I could not." "I love you," Olivia said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know I have no right to say it, and you do not have to say it back. But I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. It is the most real thing in my life." Colton pulled back slightly, his amber eyes searching her face. "I love you too," he said, and the wonder in his voice made her heart soar. "I think I started falling for you the day you ran toward me when I came back from tracking the rustlers. You were so worried, so genuinely frightened for my safety. No one has cared about me like that since my mother died." They kissed again, and this time it held the promise of all the days to come. When Colton finally pulled away, he kept his arm around her waist, as though afraid she might disappear if he let go. "Will you show me?" Olivia asked. "Really show me how to run this ranch? Not just as someone helping out, but as your true partner." "I would like nothing more," Colton said. And so they began again, building their life on a foundation of honesty instead of deception. Colton taught Olivia everything he knew about ranching, and she proved to be a quick and eager student. She learned to rope cattle, to treat minor injuries and illnesses in the herd, to read the weather and predict when storms were coming. She also learned about Colton, discovering the layers beneath his quiet exterior. He told her about his childhood, about how his father had been a dreamer who saw potential where others saw only hardship. His mother had been the practical one, keeping the ranch running when his father got lost in grand plans. Colton had inherited both traits, the dreamer and the pragmatist, and he carried the weight of honoring both their memories. Olivia shared more of her own story too. She told him about her parents, about the fever that had taken them within days of each other, about her aunt's cold household and the years she had spent feeling like an unwanted burden, about the fear that had driven her to accept Margaret's desperate plan. "I was so scared of ending up alone," she confessed one night as they sat on the porch, watching the stars. "Of being invisible and forgotten. When Margaret told me about your letters, about this life you were offering, it felt like a miracle, even knowing it was not truly meant for me. Colton took her hand and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. You are not invisible, he said. Not to me. And you will never be alone again. I promise you that. As fall turned to winter, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. They worked together during the day and spent the evenings reading or talking or simply sitting in companionable silence. The physical distance between them gradually closed, until one cold December night, Olivia appeared at Colton's bedroom door. I do not want to sleep alone anymore, she said softly. If you will have me. Colton's answer was to pull her inside and kiss her until they were both breathless. That night, their marriage became real in every sense, and Olivia finally understood what it meant to be truly known and truly loved by another person. The winter was harsh, with snow piling high around the ranch and temperatures dropping below freezing. But inside the house, Olivia and Colton created their own warmth. They spent the long, dark evenings planning for the spring, talking about expanding the herd and maybe building a larger barn. Colton taught Olivia to play chess, and she taught him the dances she had learned as a girl in St. Louis. One particularly cold January evening, as they sat by the fire, Colton said, I have been thinking about children. Olivia looked up from her mending, her heart skipping. Oh, I always imagined having a family, Colton said. Sons and daughters to help run the ranch to carry on after I am gone. But only if you want that too. I know it is a hard life for children sometimes, out here away from town. I want it, Olivia said, setting aside her sewing. I want to build a family with you. I want this house to be filled with laughter and noise and all the beautiful chaos that children bring. Colton smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his whole face. Then we will make that happen, he said. Together. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and turning the hills green. The ranch burst into activity, with calves being born and new foals appearing in the pasture. Olivia worked alongside Colton from dawn until dusk, and though the work was exhausting, she had never been happier. In late April, she began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted for a week, she began to suspect the truth. She waited until she was certain before telling Colton, and when she finally did, over breakfast one sunny morning, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He jumped up from the table, pulled her into his arms, and spun her around the kitchen, laughing with pure joy. A baby, he kept saying. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? Olivia asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not begin to cover it, Colton said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. This is everything I ever wanted. You are everything I ever wanted. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Olivia found the summer heat more oppressive than the year before. Colton became almost comically protective, insisting she rest frequently and refusing to let her do any heavy lifting. Olivia found it both annoying and endearing. They prepared the spare room as a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and building a cradle from wood Colton had been saving for something special. As Olivia's belly grew, so did their excitement. They spent hours discussing names, debating whether they wanted to know the baby's gender before the birth or be surprised. In the end, they decided to wait. Life has already given us so many surprises, Colton said, his hand resting on her swollen stomach. One more will not hurt. The baby came on a crisp November morning, arriving with the same dramatic timing that had characterized Olivia's entry into Colton's life. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Olivia was certain she could not continue. But Colton stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, and the town doctor proved skilled and patient. When the baby finally emerged, wailing lustily, the doctor announced, "You have a son." Colton's face was wet with tears as he held the tiny, red-faced infant. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas William Lawrence after both their fathers. Thomas was a healthy, hungry baby who quickly established himself as the center of their universe. Olivia had never known exhaustion like those first few weeks, but she had also never known such overwhelming love. Watching Colton with their son took her breath away. He was gentle and patient, changing diapers and walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night. He sang lullabies in his deep, rough voice and told stories about the ranch, about the legacy Thomas would one day inherit. "I am grateful every day that Margaret changed her mind," Olivia confessed one night as they watched Thomas sleep in his cradle. "And that I was desperate enough to take her place. If I had not come here, I would have missed all of this. I would have missed you." Colton pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I am grateful too," he said, "for every decision that brought you to me, even the questionable ones. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible." As Thomas grew, he proved to be an active, curious child with his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair. He toddled after Colton around the ranch, insisting on helping with everything, even when his help consisted mainly of getting in the way. Colton was endlessly patient, explaining every task and letting Thomas participate as much as a small child could. When Thomas was 2, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth, was born on a warm May evening, arriving much faster than her brother had. She was smaller and quieter, with delicate features and her father's serious expression. "Now we have one of each," Colton said, holding Rose while Thomas climbed onto the bed to inspect his new sister. "A matched set." "Is that all you want?" Olivia asked. "Just 2. Colton looked at his family, gathered there in the bedroom, and smiled. "I will take as many children as God sees fit to give us," he said, "as long as you are willing." They ended up with 5 children over the next 8 years. After Rose came another boy, Samuel. Then twin girls they named Grace and Hope, and finally one more boy, Benjamin. The house was never quiet anymore, filled with the constant noise of children playing, arguing, laughing, and learning. Colton expanded the ranch to provide for their growing family, taking on more land and increasing the herd. Olivia managed the household and helped educate the children, teaching them to read and write and do arithmetic. She also taught them about honor and honesty, making sure they understood that the truth was always worth telling, no matter how difficult. Sometimes, on rare quiet evenings, Olivia would think about the path that had brought her here. The lies, the fear, the desperate gamble that could have ended in disaster. She had been so certain that she was irreplaceable, just a substitute for the woman Colton had truly wanted. But over the years, she had learned that love was not about being first or being perfect. It was about showing up, doing the work, and choosing each other every day. When Thomas turned 16, Colton began teaching him the deeper aspects of running the ranch, preparing him to eventually take over. Thomas took to it naturally, showing the same love for the land that his father had. Samuel proved to be more interested in books and numbers, and Colton supported that too, making plans to send him to school in San Francisco. The girls were still young, but already showing their distinct personalities. Grace was bold and adventurous, while Hope was gentle and thoughtful. Little Benjamin, at 6 years old, was still determining who he would become. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked Colton one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. "That I was not who you thought I would be." Colton turned to her, taking her hand. The years had added silver to his dark hair and deepened the lines around his eyes, but he was still the handsome cowboy who had taken her breath away that first day. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "You are exactly who I needed, even if I did not know it at the time. You made me feel like I could do anything, build anything, as long as you were by my side. You made me feel irreplaceable," Olivia said softly. "When I came here, I was just filling in for someone else. But you made me feel like I was the only person who could possibly fit in this life in your heart." "Because you are," Colton said, leaning over to kiss her. After all these years, his kisses still made her heart race. "You always were." As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Olivia looked at her life and felt nothing but gratitude. The Double L Ranch had grown and prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the valley. But more importantly, it had become a home filled with love and laughter. Their children grew and thrived. Thomas eventually married a local girl named Sarah and built his own house on the ranch property, taking over more of the daily operations as Colton slowed down. Samuel did go to school in San Francisco and became an accountant, though he returned to Knight's Ferry every summer. Grace and Hope both married good men, ranchers who appreciated their independent spirits. Benjamin, the baby of the family, decided to become a teacher, opening a school in Knight's Ferry to serve the children of the valley. Colton and Olivia grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Olivia stood in the kitchen, looking at the table laden with food, and marveled at how full her life had become. "What are you thinking about?" Colton asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "About how close I came to missing all of this," Olivia said, leaning back against him. "If I had told you the truth that first day, if you had sent me away, I would have lost everything." "But you did not," Colton reminded her. "You took a risk and it paid off. We both took risks, choosing to build something real from such shaky beginnings." "I do love you," Olivia said, turning in his arms. "More now than even that first day I said it. I did not know it was possible to love someone this much." "I love you too," Colton said, kissing her forehead. "My replacement bride who became the most irreplaceable person in my world." They walked outside hand in hand to join their family. The yard was full of people now. 3 generations gathered to celebrate their love. As Olivia looked around at all the faces, at the children and grandchildren who existed because she had been brave enough to step off that stagecoach, she felt overwhelming peace. This was what she had been searching for all those years ago when she left St. Louis. Not just a home or a husband, but a place where she belonged. A place where she was not just seen, but cherished. A place where she was, finally and forever, irreplaceable. Colton squeezed her hand, and they smiled at each other, sharing that wordless communication that came from decades of partnership. Then they stepped into the crowd of their loved ones, ready to celebrate the life they had built together from that one desperate, daring decision. The party lasted until well after dark, with music and dancing and stories that grew more elaborate with each telling. The grandchildren fell asleep in various corners, exhausted from running and playing. As the evening wound down and their children began gathering their families to leave, each one hugged Colton and Olivia tightly. "Thank you for showing us what love looks like," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "For giving us this foundation to build our own families on." After everyone had gone, Colton and Olivia sat together on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket against the cool evening air. The ranch was quiet now, peaceful in the moonlight. 30 years, Olivia mused. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday I stepped off that stagecoach, terrified you would see right through my deception. Other times it feels like I have been yours forever. You have been mine forever, Colton said. We just had to find each other first. And I think, despite everything, it happened exactly the way it was supposed to. If Margaret had shown up that day, she would have been miserable here. She never wanted this life. But you did. You wanted it enough to risk everything for it. I wanted you, Olivia corrected. Once I met you, once I saw the kind of man you were, I would have risked anything to stay. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch at night. An owl hooted in the distance, and somewhere a cow lowed softly to her calf. These were the sounds that had become the soundtrack to their lives. You ever wonder what became of Margaret? Colton asked. Olivia considered the question. They had received one letter from her cousin, years ago, announcing her marriage to Daniel Bennett. The note had been stiff and formal, with no mention of what had transpired in California. Olivia had written back with congratulations but never received a reply. I hope she is happy, Olivia said honestly. I hope she found with Daniel what I found with you. Despite everything, she was not a bad person, just young and confused about what she wanted. And she helped bring us together, Colton said. Even if that was not her intention, so perhaps I should be grateful to her too. They remained on the porch until the cold drove them inside. The house felt especially large with just the two of them again, after years of children filling every room with noise and energy. But Olivia found she liked this phase of their lives too. There was something peaceful about having time just for each other again. In bed that night, Colton pulled her close and they lay tangled together the way they had for 30 years. Promise me something, he murmured into the darkness. Anything, Olivia said. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will never regret coming here. Even when things get hard, even when life throws challenges at us, promise me you will remember why you stayed. I promise, Olivia said. I could never regret you, Colton. Never. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. They buried friends and celebrated the births of great-grandchildren. The ranch changed with the times, adding new technologies and methods while maintaining the traditions Colton's parents had established. Through it all, Olivia and Colton remained each other's constant, each other's home. When Colton turned 65, he officially retired from ranching, turning full control over to Thomas. It was harder for him than Olivia expected, letting go of the work that had defined him for so long. But she helped him find new purposes, new ways to contribute. He mentored young ranchers in the valley, sharing decades of accumulated wisdom. He spent more time with their grandchildren, teaching them about the land and the legacy they would inherit. Olivia continued to manage their household and became involved in the community in new ways. She helped establish a library in Knight's Ferry and worked with the church to provide assistance to families in need. She also wrote down the stories of their life together, wanting to preserve them for future generations. On a warm spring day, when Olivia was 70 and Colton was 72, they took a ride out to the spot where they had sat on horseback 35 years earlier, when Colton had told her he was glad she had come. The landscape had not changed much. The hills were still golden, the creek still rang clear and cold, and the cattle still grazed peacefully. You remember what I almost told you that day? Olivia asked. I almost confessed everything, right here in this spot. I know, Colton said. I could see it in your eyes. You had something you wanted to say, but you pulled back at the last moment. Did you suspect the truth? Olivia asked, genuinely curious. Colton was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I think part of me knew something was not quite right," he admitted. "There were little inconsistencies, things that did not quite match the letters, but I did not want to see them. I was so lonely and you made me feel less alone, so I chose to believe what you told me." "I am sorry I put you in that position," Olivia said. "I am sorry for all the lies, even though they brought us here." "I am not," Colton said firmly. "Not anymore. Those lies gave us the space to fall in love without expectations or preconceptions. In a way, they set us free to become who we were meant to be together." They rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Olivia felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. She had lived a full life, richer than she had ever imagined possible. She had loved and been loved, had raised children who became good people, had built something lasting and meaningful. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Colton took both her hands. "I want you to know," he said, "that you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Not the ranch, not the success, not anything else. You, just you." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "You are my everything," she said. "You always have been." They held each other close, two souls who had found their way to each other through deception and desperation, but who had built something true and lasting from those flawed beginnings. As Olivia drifted off to sleep in Colton's arms, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the path that had led her here, for the courage to take Margaret's place, and for the cowboy who had made her feel irreplaceable. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. Colton and Olivia worked in the garden together, planting seeds for the summer vegetables. Their hands were gnarled with age now, but they still worked well together, moving in the synchronized rhythm of decades of partnership. Thomas came by with their oldest grandson, James, who was learning the finer points of ranch management. They stayed for lunch, filling the house with noise and laughter. As Olivia served the meal she had prepared, she caught Colton's eye across the table, and they shared a smile. This was their legacy, she realized. Not just the ranch or the land, but this. The love they had built, the family they had created, the example they had set. Their story would continue through their children and grandchildren, through the values they had instilled and the life they had modeled. After Thomas and James left, Colton and Olivia sat on the porch swing, rocking gently in the afternoon breeze. "I have been thinking," Colton said, "about writing down our story. The real story, including how we met and all the messy parts. So our grandchildren and great-grandchildren know the truth." "Are you sure?" Olivia asked. "We have never told anyone the full story." "I am sure," Colton said, "because the truth is not shameful. The truth is that two imperfect people found each other in imperfect circumstances and chose to build something beautiful anyway. That is a story worth telling." So they began the project together, spending their evenings remembering and recording the details of their life. Colton wrote about his loneliness before Olivia arrived, about the moment he first saw her and the slow process of falling in love. Olivia wrote about her fear and desperation, about taking Margaret's place, and about discovering that she had found exactly where she belonged. They wrote about the challenges they had faced, the misunderstandings and arguments and hard times. But they also wrote about the joys, the laughter, the quiet moments of connection that made everything worthwhile. When they finished, they had created a document that was honest and raw and ultimately hopeful. "This is who we are," Colton said, reading through the pages. "Not perfect, but real." They gave copies to each of their children, who read them with tears and laughter and deep appreciation. "We always knew you two had something special," Rose told them, "but we did not know just how remarkable your story was." As their 70s became their 80s, Colton and Olivia slowed down considerably. They spent their days in simple pleasures, sitting in the garden, playing cards, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. But they were still deeply in love, still finding new ways to show their affection for each other. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration. Nearly 100 people gathered at the ranch, descendants and friends and neighbors. Colton and Olivia stood together, holding hands as they had for 5 decades, and looked out at the crowd with wonder. 50 years ago, I stood in a church and married a woman I barely knew, Colton said in his speech. I thought I was doing the practical thing, finding a partner to help run the ranch. What I got instead was the love of my life, my best friend, my everything. Olivia, you have been my constant through every storm, my joy through every success. I thank God every day that you stepped off that stagecoach and into my life. Olivia could not speak through her tears, so she simply held him tight while their family applauded. Later, as they danced together, moving slowly to music played by their grandchildren, she whispered, "Thank you for seeing me, the real me. Thank you for making me feel irreplaceable." "You are irreplaceable," Colton whispered back. "There is no one else who could have been my partner in this life. It was always supposed to be you." They continued on, growing older together with grace and gratitude. When Colton's health began to fail in his 87th year, Olivia never left his side. She sat by his bed, holding his hand and telling him stories about their life together, reminding him of all the beautiful moments they had shared. "I am not afraid," Colton told her one afternoon. "I have lived a full life, loved and been loved. That is all anyone can ask for." "Do not leave me yet," Olivia pleaded, though she knew it was selfish. "I am not ready." "You are the strongest person I know," Colton said, his voice weak but certain. "You will be fine, and I will be waiting for you whenever you are ready to join me." He passed peacefully on a warm summer evening, surrounded by family, with Olivia holding his hand. She felt the moment he left, felt the absence of him like a physical wound. But she also felt gratitude for the 53 years they had shared, for every moment of joy and sorrow they had experienced together. Olivia lived another 3 years, staying on the ranch with Thomas and his family. She spent her days in the garden Colton had built for her, telling stories to her great-grandchildren about the cowboy who had stolen her heart. She never regretted a single day of their life together, not even the ones that began with deception. When her time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, with a smile on her face. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Colton, looking more peaceful than they had seen her since he passed. They buried her next to Colton on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a large oak tree. The stone read, "Olivia Roswell Lawrence. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. She arrived as a stranger but became irreplaceable." The ranch continued on, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But they never forgot the couple who had built it, who had taken desperate chances and flawed beginnings and created something beautiful and lasting. The story Colton and Olivia had written together became a treasured family document, read at weddings and passed down to each new generation. It reminded them all that love was not about perfect beginnings or flawless execution. It was about showing up, doing the work, and choosing each other through all the messy, complicated, beautiful moments that made up a life. It was about taking risks, being honest even when it was hard, and building something true from whatever materials you had. Most importantly, it reminded them that everyone had value, that everyone could be irreplaceable to someone who chose to truly see them. Olivia had arrived as a replacement, a substitute for someone else. But Colton had looked past the deception and seen her for who she really was. He had made her feel valued and cherished and essential. And in return, she had given him the same gift, showing him that he was worthy of love and devotion. Their legacy lived on not just in the land they had tended or the children they had raised, but in the example they had set. They had proven that it was never too late to start over, that honesty was worth the risk, and that love could grow even in the most unexpected circumstances. The Double L Ranch stood as a testament to their vision and hard work, but the real monument to their lives was the love they had shared, the family they had built, and the story they had left behind.